One of our favorite guys to talk to around draft time is Jeremy Woo, now doing work with ESPN. He's one of our favorites. Usually around this time, we're talking about, all right, Kings lottery. What's going on with the Kings in the lottery? The Kings aren't picking until number 24, so we got to talk about that. But Jeremy, how you doing during this wild time for you?
I'm good, man. Just sort of the same old. It's a lot of being on the phone, a lot more writing. But I always think it's nice this time of year because you feel important. In July, no one will be as focused on the draft, and then I take a break. But for now, you gotta just kind of enjoy it, I think.
Well, I remember talking to you last year around this time, and even back then we were talking about Victor Wembanyama. It's kind of crazy, and here we are. He's going to be the number one pick in the draft. I'm curious from your perspective, like what type of growth have you seen from him over the last year?
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. I think maybe that's one element of, I know we spend a lot of time talking about Victor. Maybe that's one thing that, like, if I could hammer it home, just how much better he's gotten in a year.
Wow.
Um, I honestly wasn't 100% sure what to expect. When we got to Vegas for those games in October, just because you're working off of clips, and he didn't have an amazing season last season. He was still on track to be the number one pick, but it wasn't. I think no one was 100% sure that this like complete dominating breakout was going to happen. And then you saw it, and it's just unbelievable the way that he has sort of become a shot creator and like a real sort of focal point of his team. In the situation that they put him in, it's been great to see. And the guy's the real deal. I don't think there's too much doubt about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people try and pick apart maybe certain aspects of his game. And really, there's not much to it. But then when you look at everything going on with him physically, and people keep talking about how he's growing, you just did a piece on the guy who is helping to keep Victor Wembanyama healthy. Um, you know, we see how serious Victor takes his game, but how serious he takes his body and how he wants to keep it healthy. What is it about him and the guy that has been helping him?
Yeah, well, I just think they've done a good job, sort of his whole career to date of kind of putting him with specialists and getting different opinions and consulting on the best way to keep him healthy as he's continued to grow. I think from speaking to Guillaume, who is his trainer, who's also the strength and conditioning coach for his team, who they brought in sort of to work with him specifically this year. I think it's sort of refreshing. They're pretty focused on doing it the right way. They're patient. They're not trying to have him be over muscled right away. Uh, People ask me that all the time, just sort of casually, like, well, how is he gonna stay healthy? Well, he's not really an interior player. He's a perimeter player. He'll do some things on the inside, but like he's gonna get hurt if you throw him in there playing center 35 minutes a night. But he's so skilled and he can play on the outside, which is why I think to some extent he kind of transcends that a little bit. And they're just focused on him uh, being durable, flexible, and just sort of keeping his body active, to just sort of prepare for the workload and the stress. With big guys who move around a lot, we see stress injuries in the feet a lot. They have him do a lot of stuff barefoot, which I think is very interesting. And he hasn't missed a game yet this season. So knock on wood, it seems to be working. And again, all these guys play a lot, you have the ball a lot, their injury risks, and it's definitely heightened with taller guys. But so far, so good. I think is really all we can ask for.
You've been doing this for a long time. You've seen a lot of prospects over the years. Where does he rank? Is he near the top for you in all the years you've been doing this?
Yeah, I've been doing. I guess it's been I guess like a decade or so. I mean, for me, it's no question he's the uh, best prospect I've seen. Just in terms of his being as young as he is, with the body type he has, it's all very unique. But also from speaking to him and going over there and kind of getting a better feel for the situation. I mean, he's a very smart guy. He's very focused. He kind of checks the boxes for what you hope. Someone who's going to be under this much pressure, this much of a microscope right away. as much as you can hope someone to handle it, like I think he's pretty well equipped to handle it.
And of course, he's going to the Spurs, which just seems like the perfect situation for him, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, clearly they have a good history of developing bigs, and they're in a position too, I think, with their salary cap where they have flexibility. They've kind of cleared the decks. They have some young guys, but also will have some flexibility in how they choose to build the team out. They don't have to hit the gas right away next season and try to make the playoffs. They can. But my guess would be they'll kind of take it as it goes. Like I doubt you see them go all in right away. They'll want to manage his minutes and his workload too, as he gets used to playing the full schedule. So those are all things I think we'll have to sort of see how it goes. But I do think that, I think we can trust San Antonio to put a good plan in place, and they'll probably be pretty good in a couple of years.
What are you more excited for with Victor Wembanyama, his offense or his defense at the
Ooh.
next level?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think the offense is what we all come for. The tough jumpers, and you get your popcorn out and you watch, and it's like, wow. I was on the call for his game on Sunday, and some of the shots he made in the second half, after not really making any shots in the first half, were really impressive. It takes confidence to do that. The defense, I think we almost take it for granted because he's so tall and he's so impactful. But I think we'll see both, and I think the defense may actually translate faster right away, just because of how long he is. And if you're a guard and you're driving into the paint and he's there, like it's on your mind. And I think just the visual and sort of psychological impact of having a guy like that down there makes a big difference. Where his shot making will be there, but it's going to take him a little time to be efficient and sort of figure out how he can be most effective, and that's going to take a little time. But I don't doubt that he'll get there.
Do you see a lot of star potential in this draft? Is it a deep draft? Like, what's your kind of overall view on the talent level here?
Yeah, well, I think it's a solid lottery. Apart from Victor, I think everyone else kind of comes with some caveats and some questions. So I tend to be a little bit skeptical just generally when I do this, just sort of how I am. It's not like a personal thing with players. I just tend to err on the side of caution. But I think it's a solid draft. I think we'll see guys have good careers. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be in the order in which they get picked, just because it is a little bit flatter, where there's not a ton separating some of these players, and a lot of it will have to do with situation. So it's going to take a few years to bear out. But I do think it's a decent draft. It thins out a little bit faster. We saw a lot of guys go back to school who could have been late first, maybe probably early to mid second round, and that sort of changes the depth of the draft a little bit. But I think overall, they're players worth getting excited about who are going to have solid NBA careers.
You talked about how Victor has just only gotten better and better. Scoot Henderson is someone that we've seen a lot of change with his body over this last year, obviously just growing, maturing and everything. But what about him and his game? Have you seen him take a leap? I know they stopped him playing pretty early in his season. How are you feeling about Scoot Henderson at the next level?
Yeah, I think Scoot's a really good prospect. This season for him, it was kind of like he had the amazing first game going head to head with Victor in Vegas, and then never quite reached that level again. He was kind of banged up all season. The spacing on that Ignite team was not like amazing. It wasn't just from like a roster construction standpoint. I don't know how well they fit together all the time. But and also I think sometimes you talk about Scoot or the Thompson twins or whatever who are in these sort of NBA pathway programs for 2 years. I think sometimes there's an element of like boredom sometimes that can sort of set in for these young guys, and it's not like a critique of the teams, but it's just spending 2 years knowing you're going to the NBA. It's really on you to get better. The surroundings is kind of the same. Like I just think there can be an element of stagnation. Doesn't necessarily mean anything in the long run. But that can happen too. So like, it wasn't like an amazing season where he like made a giant leap from where he was a year ago. But I do think he's gotten better. I do think he's number two for me. whether he goes 2 or 3 or what. We'll have a very solid NBA career at least. So
the latest mock draft you and Gavoni did for ESPN.com has at the moment, and we know things are going to shift here. It has Kris Murray going to the Sacramento Kings at number 24. I like Kris Murray a lot, and there's like a lot of comparisons, obviously, to Keegan in their style of play. Do you think there's a chance that he will be there at 24? Because part of me just has a tough time seeing him fall past 19 with Golden State.
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Yeah.
It depends. Like you said, Golden State's a good example. It depends on which way these teams go. If you look at the draft order and teams that are trying to win now, Kris is a guy who I think is ready to come in and knock down shots and space the floor and like do valuable things. He's low maintenance, sort of like Keegan in that way, where like he's not going to have to dominate the ball to be effective. He's not. I doubt he'll be quite as impactful as Keegan was as a rookie. But I think we have to try to not fall into the trap of like comparing twins, because it happens, or brothers in general. Like It always happens. Like we did it with like Lonzo and LaMelo, and different. There's always like similarities, but I do think there's a chance he could be on the board there in the mid-20s.
And do you see the similarities though between the two? Because like you said, it is such an easy thing. It's like, yeah, they're very similar because they're identical twins, but like,
right.
It seems like they might have some similarities in their games.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like, I would always joke, so Kris is left-handed and Keegan's right-handed, so you could always tell, obviously, like when they shoot the ball, which one is which. Having like watched them a lot at Iowa. But and also I think you can kind of tell them apart when they're together. When they're not together, it's harder. But when they're together, I can always tell. But I think they're a little bit different. Kris, it's funny because he was always reputed as the better shooter, but then we saw Keegan take a really big jump as a shooter last spring, and then carried that over into the season. Obviously, with the Kings, became a really good shooter. So I do think he'll have that element. I don't think he's as aggressive of a scorer. It's kind of funny, like also with twins, oftentimes guys grow up playing as teammates and they kind of like fall into different roles. Like, I mean, you could talk about it in the context of the Thompson twins as well. It's always like one twin is the more aggressive scorer and one of them is like a playmaker. It's a little different because Kris is more of like an off-ball scorer. But he does some of the same things, and obviously they're somewhat similar physically. I think Kris is a little bit smaller than Keegan, at least last time I saw. But I think he'll have a solid NBA career. I don't know if he'll be an all-star or anything like that. But again, there's just a need for guys who have size and are consistent and can shoot and can kind of hold their own and compete on defense. And I think he'll do those things.
We've got much more with Jeremy Woo coming up, but we should mention that today's podcast presented by our buddy Sean Stanfield over at rate.com/Sean Stanfield. If you're wondering, can I afford to buy a house? You should hit up Sean.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before, but there's not a lot of people out there who just like love being on the phone, talking about these things. Sean's a great texter. You can just throw Sean a text. You can throw him a text.
He can talk
right
to.
Now.
He can
and
talk
he
to.
Can
just
talk
to be clear.
to. He can definitely talk to. He can do all the things. He can email, talk, text, whatever way works for you in communicating. Sean will do. He's even had some of our listeners send over all their numbers to see what they can and cannot do. Can they refinance? They ask him, and he sends them a customized video of all their numbers and everything that works for them. He's just such a helpful person. We've known him for years. So if you're looking to refinance your house or you just need to know and have so many questions, hit up Sean.
You could do that at rate.com/Sean Stanfield or give him a call or text him 916-276-7563. That's 916-276-7563. That's Equal Housing Lender, subject to credit approval. NMLS ID number 349707. Company NMLS ID number 2611. NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Thanks so much to our friends at
Guaranteed.
Great.
Guaranteed.
Great.
We're also presented today by New York Times bestselling author, the one and only T.R. Reagan. If you like thrillers and you like reading things that are dark, twisted, scary. Oh, by the way, based in Sacramento.
Oh, yes.
You need to pick up a T.R. Reagan book. You can buy a hard copy,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
I don't know why I mentioned that. 3, 2, 1. I'm just going to
All
toss
right.
to you. 3, 2,
do
1.
that.
We're also presented today by a New York Times best-selling author, the one and only T.R. Reagan.
It's summertime. You need a summer read. And T.R. Reagan's got all the creepy, weird, twisted thrillers that you need to read before bed. So then you also have nightmares. And so you also sleep with one eye open and check all of your doors 24/7. Yes, that has been my life ever since I've picked up a T.R. Reagan book, and I'm dead serious. I was too afraid to read them for so many years. So finally in my 30s is when I was like, you know what? I'm going to do. Millions of people have bought these books. She's a New York Times bestselling author. It's like, it can't be that bad. So, it's so amazing. I can't put them down, but I'm also creeped out. So if you want to be on that level, make sure to go to Amazon.com, search TR Reagan, or you can go to her website, trreagan.com. You can get a Kindle, hard copy, whatever you need to get your summer read done. And another guy that a lot of Kings fans have been talking about is Trayce Jackson-Davis. What have you seen with his game?
Yeah, Trayce is an interesting case study because he had a really productive career in Indiana, but like it never seemed like he was adding much to his game the first few seasons, and then finally as a senior he kind of broke out and the team had more success, and I think people start to look at him in a different lens a little bit in that way. Sort of undersized for a 4 or 5, whatever, but going to be a productive rebounder. Going to finish, he really only shoots with his left hand, but he's really good with that left hand. So like, I think he'll be effective. He's not going to be like a post up player or anything like that. But I just think we've seen enough guys who have the athleticism and the productivity history like him sort of had success. And he's experienced. So I think he's someone teams view, you can plug him in and have him come off the bench. There's probably not as much upside as some of these other guys with him. But can he be a solid rotation player? Sure.
You talked about the kind of the talent level and maybe the drop off a little bit, and there's not a lot of separation in this draft. Are there some names that maybe are projected in the teens that you could see potentially falling in the Kings range at 24?
Yeah, I mean, so I would keep an eye on. I mean, you could see it. Well, if you just look at the shape of the draft, it's a lot of guards. Someone has to fall a little bit. It's tricky because you have those 2 Brooklyn picks at 21 and 22. And I think, at least for me, I kind of view those 2 picks as kind of a backstop where Brooklyn is sort of at an interesting stage with their franchise where they're kind of in transition. They can kind of take whoever they want. And they'll have 2 picks if they use them both. So you could see them just kind of like snap up whoever falls. So it kind of like creates like a break point to me in the draft right there. But I think you could see guys like maybe like a Bryce Sensabaugh or like a Colby Jones or even like maybe Noah Clowney, like guys like that, maybe slip a pick or 2 later and into that mid-20s. And, I think the Kings will be in a spot to grab someone they like if they use that pick.
The Kings also have 2 second-round picks. And are there any guys that are flying under the radar, second-rounders that are flying under the radar for you?
Well, it kind of depends on what you need. Like, I don't know that the second round is like the strength of this draft on paper. Okay. Like it kind of thins out a little bit. But guys who might be there, I mean, 38 is not a bad pick. I mean, you look at, there could be sort of experienced college guys who can kind of step in and help, like a Jalen Wilson or a Keontae Johnson or, so someone might fall there who's going to help them. I think the interesting dynamic to watch for too is going to be, how teams use second rounders with the new collective bargaining agreement, sort of coming in, like impacting teams' ability to keep first rounders at times, right? So like with the second round picks, I think teams will sort of prioritize getting guys they like, whether it's on a 2-way or a guaranteed deal. Those contracts become more valuable now, like being able to develop talent and retain it, sort of due to the technicalities of the CBA. So that's something that's sort of a complicated issue, but will be worth keeping an eye on to see, if teams are as eager to sell those picks this year or use them.
Do you have a guy in the draft that maybe he's like being overlooked, but you're like, dude, I really like this guy.
Like a draft crush.
Yeah, a draft crush. We keep asking these experts, like, this is kind of my draft crush. Maybe he's not like a highly touted guy, but someone you're like, I actually think he could be really good at the next level.
Yeah. For me, like it's been sort of like some of the older college players who I think probably aren't getting super hyped because they're maybe a little bit boring when we talk about, like when we throw their names out, like Jaime Jaquez from UCLA, I love. I think he should be a first round pick. I don't know if he necessarily will be. I think it's definitely possible, but he's not going to get drafted like high, right? But I think he'll have a really long NBA career, just very solid in a lot of areas. And then Marcus Sasser from Houston, another player who I love, who again I don't think will be there at 38 for the Kings, but I'd be surprised if he were. But might go into the second round, early second. Someone who I think will be able to add value playing both guard spots. He'll make shots. He'll guard well. Like just a rock solid, experienced player. Like I think those are the type of guys in this draft where sometimes you think yourself out of it. Like there are a lot of guys who are younger, who are maybe upside development picks, and you're in the 20s and you're like, oh, well, we'll just try and kind of see what we can get. But sometimes as a result, those guys who are already pretty good get overlooked. So those are two names that I really like. In the 20s or really anywhere you can get them.
You might have already named some of these, but who have been some of the biggest risers in the pre-draft process?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting. I mean, I think one really hot name is Bilal Koulibaly, who is Victor Wembanyama's teammate in France. So they're still in the playoffs. Their team just made the finals, so they won't be over here probably in time to do any workouts. It's not like Victor will have to work out, but Bilal probably won't be able to do any workouts stateside. But certainly someone teams are really interested in, and he's been playing really, really well during this last few weeks, particularly after not really being able to get into the rotation throughout the season. Like when I was in France in November, he was not playing a lot, and he didn't play that well in the game. He was playing with the younger team, and I went to watch him, and he wasn't playing that well then. So he's really, I think, come a long way in a short time, and he's got a great physical traits for a wing. He's developing some skill and some shooting, and is really impactful defensively already. And he's still 18 years old, so he's someone who I think is rising, even though he's not really going through the pre-draft process. Yeah. I think just by nature of everybody seeing him play and being aware of him, I think he's helping himself. And then I would look, coming out of the combine, I think probably the two hotter names were Olivier Maxence Prosper from Marquette, and then Brandon Podziemski from Santa Clara. Those two guys played well on the first day of the combine, and I think are sort of working their way into that late first round, maybe even closer to like the around 20, like at least to be in the conversation. Just with their productivity and the way they've sort of handled the pre-draft so far. So again, we hear a lot of things this time of year, and it's kind of hard to know who's really rising. But those two names have come up a lot with teams.
I got a couple of questions from our listeners. One from our guy, Umizi. He wants to know, how do you judge shooters shooting during combine workouts versus their actual college shooting, their actual college numbers?
Yeah, if I have to be honest, like I don't really look at the drill results at all. Personally, like if I'm always at the combine. So like if I'm sitting there and I'm just like watching people shoot, like I'm watching just to sort of see mechanically how it looks. And just sort of like going off sort of the vibe of like how someone shoots, like how confident, how they're, how the reps look and how consistent they are. I think it's hard to be too results obsessed with shooting, like unless you're looking at like a really large sample, like that's always going to be more indicative, right? Like any one day, anyone can make shots. But I think you have to look at it that way. But in person, there's still some things you can sort of glean just from watching, like if you watch enough games and watch enough players shoot. But it's always hard. It's hard to know. It's hard to project. But again, the bigger data sample is always going to be more instructive than, how you shot in a drill one time.
Right. Pernille asks, what type of prospects do you generally believe have a tendency to become the best NBA players, like a certain archetype, whether that's high IQ defenders, elite shooters and cutters, etc.?
Yeah. For me, I'm always kind of trying to focus on feel. Like that's a big thing for me. Like I really like guys who are unselfish, to the point where like sometimes I think I probably undervalue guys who shoot too much. But like my thing is I always think like the NBA already has enough scorers, right? Like most teams have established guys in place who are good scorers and are going to score the ball. So like unless you're really an elite level scorer, and usually we know who those guys are as prospects, like my question is, what else can you do? Like, it's nice to be able to have obviously a scoring element to your game, but like I want guys who are going to share the ball, who are going to compete defensively, and sort of do those small things. Like, you could simplify it as role player traits, right? But like, for me, that's a big thing I look for. Because if I'm building a team, like personally, my preference is I want guys who move the ball and share it.
Yes.
And I think if you just look at the teams that have had the most success, like if you just look at the NBA Finals for like the last
That's
decade, like if you look at the teams that have made it, it's teams that share the ball
it.
most of the time, with
Are
few
you-
exceptions.
And as someone who covers the draft like you do, are you just amazed at Miami's ability over the years to find these guys that go undrafted? They put them through their G League system, develop them. Like Duncan Robinson, we called some of his G League games. Gabe Vincent, who we saw up close play with Stockton. I mean, these guys have turned into impactful players at the next level. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, and I give Miami a ton of credit. Like, they're a very small front office, but their guys are like always on the road. Like, I see them all the time. And people also have asked me, like, do you think other teams will try to copy what they've done? Where Miami hasn't always had draft picks, but they do scout the G League really hard, and they find these undrafted guys. And like, I have to admit, like when I saw Duncan Robinson at Summer League, like however many years ago that was, like I didn't think he was going to be a guy giving you minutes in the finals at all. But they do an amazing job of identifying these traits and going through the back door, finding guys who can kind of fit what they want, and they send them to Sioux Falls, and then bringing them into the Heat sort of when it's time. But I think it's hard to replicate. Certainly, you can scout the G League harder, right, and try to find these guys who have had to earn it over time. And they're going to be more of those stories, and they're not limited to the Heat, but like they really have a knack for it, and what they're doing works. And it's, again, we could all go to 100 G League games and wouldn't necessarily find Gabe Vincent, right? Like it takes some skill to do that. So props to them for sure.
Well, Jeremy, props to you for the amazing work. Glad you're doing stuff over at ESPN, and enjoy this run. I know you work all year for this big moment of the NBA draft, and it's quickly approaching. You're busy, so thank you so much for the time, man.
No, I appreciate it. It always kind of sneaks up,
Yeah.
And then it'll feel good like the day it's over. So
well, enjoy it. And do you go to Summer League at all?
I generally do. I have not booked my flights yet, but
all right. Well, maybe we'll see you out there.
I will be there. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you out there, and we appreciate the time as always.
Always. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Hey, the draft is coming up. We want more and more people to watch and consume our content. How can you help us? If you're listening to this on Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star review. Same with Apple Podcasts. And of course, you YouTube people, make sure you're subscribed and hit that thumbs up.